You're going to take your notes from this DIY, which is Government of the Colonies or Colonial Government, and it goes over the growth of the representative government that we have today, and how that began back in England and how it looks throughout the colonies. So one thing you need to think about as you're taking your notes is, how did representative government or self-government develop? This is beginning in England through its growth into the 13 colonies. You're going to take those notes however you would like on your pyramid page, but you need to understand that at the end you're going to be filling in that pyramid and some things off to the right. So leave yourself enough room, and I've given you an example of what I would make it look like. If you would like to use some of the back, you may. Just remember that it needs to go into your ISN, so you need to glue it in at the edge if you're going to write on the back so nothing is covered up. Okay, so we're starting with the Magna Carta in 1215. King John of England is forced to sign this document by the nobles of England. These are the higher class. It requires him to recognize their rights and limits his power. Before this, he is ruling under the divine right of the kings. That means they can pretty much do whatever they want. They own everything. They're in control of everything. But now he has to follow rules and procedures as stated in the Magna Carta. For an example, one of those is now noblemen have the right to a trial by jury. So some of the things in there you're seeing is the beginnings of this development of representative government. People are starting to be able to have a say in how their laws are created, and what they're able to do in society. And you see a lot of this in today's society in our Constitution and Bill of Rights. So eventually we end up with, in England, they have the British Parliament. So this is the law-making body of England. So in the 1200s, they developed the Parliament, which will end up being bicameral. So they'll have two houses, kind of like our Congress now that has two houses in the legislative branch. So we have the Senate and the House of Representatives. Okay, so they'll end up with that bicameral system. This is their legislative portion, like I said, and it gives the power for them to approve certain laws and taxes. And this is run off of nobles in one house and elected representatives in the other, so like the House of Commons. Okay. In England later on, and we'll see some things are happening in the colonies before this, but English Bill of Rights is created in 1689. This gives the citizens of England more rights. It limits even further the powers of the king. Free men were mostly the nobles and property owners. It expanded some rights to those outside of noble status, so we're starting to see people with less higher class starting to have a little more say and being able to represent their people. William and Mary, who are leaders at the time, had to share that power. So that is what he called joint sovereigns. So between William and Mary in Parliament, they have to actually share the power of rule. So that's what we refer to as joint sovereigns. So remember, sovereign is the person who rules. All right, a few thousand miles away from England, in the colonies, we're starting to see this representative government, this idea of it, building in the colonies. So in 1619, with the creation of the Virginia House of Burgesses, this is where we see our first elected representative government in the colonies. They're the ones that are going to create the laws and taxes for that colony. Soon after, in 1620, we're going to have the Mayflower Compact in the 13 colonies. This is the first government document and creates a body politic. So what it's saying is colonists get to choose their leaders. They also rule through the representatives, and whatever the majority says is going to be the law, that's what they go with. In 1639, the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut is created. This is written by Thomas Hooker, who is the founder of Connecticut. It is our very first written constitution. It basically says leaders and laws are chosen by the people. So once again, we're seeing representative government come through as people are creating these colonies. And it kind of gives you an idea of what the expectation is going to be. We're getting away from monarchies. We're going more towards what the people want. Colonial town meetings. This is most common in the New England area where people are living closer together, less so as the southern colonies develop where people are further and further apart. But colonial town meetings are where representatives of communities come together and meet and discuss what decisions are going to be made for those colonies. So basically it is for the colonial assembly. These are representatives that come in and talk as a legislative branch basically and create the laws of the colonies. Okay, now we can look at all of this in a pyramid form now and kind of see the progression of how things are. You can see the very top we have in England, the king. He owns all of the land. He approves all of the law. This is the most common thing prior to Magna Carta. Okay, so it's basically showing the least amount of people at the top, which here is just one or a few, the least amount of people at the top, the more power they have. And then it progressively adds more and more people as you go down. So after the king, we start to see after the signing of the Magna Carta and the creation of Parliament, which is the lawmaking group in England that creates laws and approved by the king. So you can see joint sovereigns working together, and so we start adding a little more people, a little more representatives coming in to help create laws and systems for government. Now, going over to the colonies, you see in this pink section, we have governors that are first established when colonies are going in. Now, they work directly for the king. They are appointed, but they are ruling as if the king was there. So he's appointed by the king. He rules the colony with whatever the king wants, but he's the representative of the king, not the people. So he reports directly to him. Okay, now the assemblies, this is men elected from the colony to form a law-making group. These are true representatives for a self-government. So representative government, this is where we start to see the Virginia House of Burgesses. We see the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, the Mayflower Compact. People are saying majority rules. This is what the representatives who are speaking for certain colonies want, and this is how laws and taxes are going to be pushed through, is the say of the people, essentially. Now at the bottom, you see the most people we have are added in, the least power. So more and more people are being allowed to be representatives, not just the high class, but maybe common people. This is the land-owning colonists. They're creating the self-government and documents to organize it. Now town meetings, which is the gathering of the land-owning colonists, talking about what money is going to look like, what are the laws going to look like, who's going to represent us. So the more people, they have the least power. So you're working more as a unit, not so much as one individual against another. Now the people that are allowed to vote, those are the land-owning white men. So the people that are not allowed to vote in this would be women, slaves, or indentured servants. Okay, so that's one thing you're going to have to remember. It's not everybody that has a say. It's essentially just land-owning white men.